Welcome to 7 Crazy Digital Risks, the e-commerce edition. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I do have a few quick housekeeping items. There aren't really 3 things you need to know. Questions, we will be holding questions to the end. Simply submit your question through the question pane on your screen. We will take as many questions as we have time for, but remember, we promised this session would be 30 minutes or less. Secondly, we are recording today's session. And third, we will send the presentation and link of the recording a day or two later. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. First, I'm Chris Crawford. I do lead the marketing efforts here at the Media Trust. And I'll be joined by Tony Little, our product manager responsible for creating and delivering solutions for our enterprise clients, just like those with e-commerce operations. Now, to kick this off, digital risk is a term that seems to mean different things to different individuals. There are lots of contributing factors to this umbrella, digital risks. Email compromise, SaaS vulnerabilities, in-store technology, or phishing. And while all of them are important, for the purpose of this session, we're going to be honing in on risks that are specific to e-commerce sites and mobile apps. And that distinction is super important when you look at the state of digital. You know, it seems a day can't go by without news of some website breach. We have a sampling of about 10 breaches in 2020 that really run the spectrum from nonprofits in Australia to consumer goods, so like NutriBullet and Tupperware, to music. And this is a growing problem. Cybercrime is an issue. The FBI recently released a report stating that there was a 300% increase in cybercrime in 2020. But what's important to look at is understanding what all these website breaches have in common. They are all client-side attacks, which means the code is injected and the problem can only be seen on the user's browser or device. And this is actually a pretty lucrative attack vector because there's pretty little effort needed to gain access to consumers compared to like a brick and mortar situation. One bad actor can find just one vulnerability and hit multiple targets at a time. So if you're a brand, penetration of your website will affect thousands of customers even before it's identified or shut down, depending on how large you are. And these website attacks, these client-side attacks, are so successful because you really don't own your website or mobile apps. The composition of websites have changed dramatically in the past 10 years, and they've given way from brochureware sites that have given way to dynamic personalized sites. So these sites today, they're engaged to sell. So like Mark Pritchard from Procter & Gamble likes to say, you know, the future of advertising is digital, it's programmatic, it's data-driven and automatic. And that's reflected in the e-commerce sites. So in addition to items you would expect kind of from more of an infrastructure point of view, you'll have content management platform, hosting, analytics. But there are thousands of more tools that are used to enable and customize functionality for website visitors. There's like, I think last count was more than 7,000. And these tools are like content recommendation engine, ads, data management platforms, you know, media-rich activity. And 73% of consumers are expecting this kind of customized or personalized experience that these tools enable. In retail, there are a lot of like click and collect and shoppable videos, online chat, and loyalty and reward programs. But the challenge is that this code from these third parties are executing in the browser. So it's not developed by the retailer or the webmaster. It's sourced from some vendor or business partner or public library. Sometimes it's paid for, a lot of times it's not. And so the end result is that 90% of what executes in the consumer or the user's device is from third-party code. And this is a problem because enterprises have no insight or control of this client-side execution. And so they are therefore blind to any security, data privacy, and performance issues. Now, this is not to say that third-party code is bad. It's not. It delivers the necessary and engaging functionality that consumers expect. It lies at the intersection of risk and revenue and the user experience. So from a risk perspective, it contributes to your digital attack surface, anywhere from 3 to 5 times higher than you would expect. You need to know who those vendors are. This third-party code, it brings the fourth and fifth parties to help deliver their functionality, but it explodes your digital attack surface. And if you don't know this activity, then you're vulnerable to compromise, kind of like in the mage cart situations that you hear about. Also, from a revenue perspective, you're trying to generate revenue through the website. So e-commerce sites, they need to be fast. They need to be easy to use, and they need to be secure to drive trust among your audience. But these third-party vendors, they're making calls, they're adding weight to the page, they're introducing latency. And if you're supposed to be expecting a page to load in 1 to 2 seconds, 90% of consumers will abandon a site if it takes too long. And then also think about it from the user experience. Third-party functionality that you bring to the website, you need to understand what is it doing. It also has access to your consumer data. A 2020 Verizon Business Report said that about 99% of security incidents in retail were focused on the payment data. So remember, the website, it's an experience. It's not a transaction. So your ability to manage third-party code is really the cornerstone for driving improvements in your risk posture. While there's been a lot more attention paid to cybersecurity budgets and understanding third-party risks, I'd argue that it's clearly not enough, and the money that is available for these budgets is not being spent to actually secure websites and mobile apps. So despite all the tools that are available, your digital assets are still at risk. So in talking to our clients, we've been able to really summarize these issues into 5 groups. First, there are scorecards. So what scorecards are doing is they're looking at your owned and operated code. They don't really account for the third-party code and the fourth and the fifth parties that are brought into the user experience. Then there are also consultants. So, we've had clients where their consultants have repeatedly claimed and verified that there is no third party or unauthorized code executing in the device. But that's really because they just don't have the client-side expertise to assess what is truly executing. Then there are privacy or consent management platforms, which are reliant on being provided accurate information. But this changes in a digital environment, so you need to evaluate the consumer experience from both a consent and also a non-consent perspective. There are a variety of blocking applications, something like maybe like a content security platform, but these are pretty much typically blunt instruments. They're reliant on being provided a safe inclusion or an allow list on what can actually execute. And we've seen this approach breaking sites and ruining the user experience, which is a pretty big problem if you're looking to monetize. I'd mentioned earlier that there are about 7,000 different marketing technology vendors. So imagine the difficulty of knowing all the types of domains necessary to render thousands of different user experiences for your market. And then finally, we have the third-party risk management platforms. And these are really solutions that catalog and manage interactions between enterprise and external parties or partners. But as we've seen in digital, most of these relationships aren't even known, or if they are known, there's no contract or direct interaction. So these solutions may cover certain aspects. There's still a significant amount of residual risk. Now, let's take a look at this risk. We analyzed more than 100 websites continuously throughout 2020, and we looked at them across 8 different consumer-oriented industries. And what we saw was that pretty much across all these, only about 10% of the domains that are executing on the consumer device are owned by the enterprise. 90% is third party. And about 2% of the domains that are executing are high risk and presenting a danger to you as an organization, and also to consumers through the dropping of malware or redirecting to unwanted sites. And to control your e-commerce, we need to look at these key artifacts of digital risk. And we usually, when we're working with our clients, assess it from 3 kind of points of view, or 3 questions that we ask. The first one is, we want to know who has access to my customers. So we're reviewing all the executing domains. So every time a consumer accesses the site, these are the domains and code that is executing. And this will include first and third party and any fourth and fifth parties that are brought along. So looking at the data from 2020, as expected, we see media and retail pretty much leading the pack. These are both strong consumer-oriented sites that are continuously driving users to them. Media, they need eyeballs to view content because they're compensated through ad views, whereas the retail industry, they're pushing to sell. They want people to buy their product. What is surprising is banking. It looks like in red here, there's about 100 domains. What are all these domains doing that have access to me? The second thing that we look at is volatility. How volatile is this environment? So digital, it's dynamic, it's constantly changing to deliver an optimized user experience. And you would measure this through looking at digital drift. So assessing new domains that appear in your environment. We normally look at it on a month-to-month basis. You can do it on a daily or weekly basis, but the volume really tells a better picture on a monthly basis. Again, media is high, averaging about 17%, but it is an ad-supported industry, so that makes sense. Retail is about middle of the pack, but they do appear to be fluctuating towards the end of last year, averaging about 11%. And this is likely driven by efforts to promote and support online orders. Again, healthcare in the gray, these are hospital websites where I'm sharing personal information, maybe scheduling procedures, making payments, and it should be definitely more controlled than that. And then the third thing that we look at is the data exposure. Who has access to customers? In this instance, we are looking at cookies, which is really a simplified term for consumer tracking. While you've probably heard third-party cookies are going away, but that's already yielding new tracking technologies like local storage and fingerprinting. And from our perspective, fingerprinting really went from something we saw occasionally to something that we see regularly. It's pretty ubiquitous. So this data is from 2020, which is really looking at cookies. Again, media was high and retail was in the middle. It looks like dropping about an average of 203 cookies every time a consumer accesses the site. But banking, again, is dropping 222 cookies. So who needs to know me when I'm going to my website? What are they doing with my data? And so that's just the status of the residual risk that exists in digital environments, and the role that third parties and the fourth and fifth parties that they play in expanding the digital attack surface and negatively affecting the user experience. Now, what I'd like to do is hand this off to Tony to dive into the risks that are specific to retail environments.
Yes, thank you, Chris, and hello, everybody. So what about Bob? Today we're going to walk through a digital scenario or journey that mimics a real life situation on user behavior. And one thing we want you to keep in context here is that while this is a digital scenario with a lot of digital terms and digital language, what we want you to think about is how would a human feel about these risks in a traditional brick and mortar setting. So before we jump into the actual journey, we want to walk through some of the drivers of digital risk. And this is based on a blog series that we did, 7 Crazy Things That Drive Digital Risk. And what we want you to think about again is, would you allow this behavior in a brick and mortar type setting? So the first one we want to talk about is security. And the key point here is monitoring. So within a brick and mortar setting, it's pretty easy to tell in a retail store if you have an imminent threat. Inherently as people, we're always on the lookout for this type of thing. So the concept of monitoring is as easy as telling your employees to keep an eye out. Within digital, it's a bit more complicated to tell that there's something malicious going on, like a domain bringing malware. There's no employees or security guards sitting in the store. And this really emphasizes the importance of digital monitoring to keep your consumers protected. The next item we want to talk about is payment fraud. So going back to the example of Bob, if he walked into a typical brick and mortar environment, would you want someone sitting at the cash register asking to take a picture of his credit card? Likely not. That would raise some red flags. In digital, skimming is actually a very common risk that we need to be careful and monitor for. Slow response time. So when I think of this, I think of Black Friday. So if you've ever waited in two hours in line to buy your clothes, it can be a pretty frustrating feeling. In digital, consumers have similar feelings of frustration when they wait excessive amounts of time for a page to load. Large amounts of third-party JavaScript and domains making network calls can slow a page down tremendously. It's important to monitor for this and take action to keep your customer satisfaction high. Customer hijacking. So this is an interesting one to think about. So again, imagine you're in line waiting at your favorite retail store and your cart's full of the items you need. You're getting ready to pay for it all. But all of a sudden you're whisked away, teleported completely to a different store with a cashier you've never seen before asking if you're ready to check out. So this one's a bit difficult to wrap your head around from a physical standpoint, but it's actually quite common in the world of digital. Luckily it is preventable through the use of careful monitoring on some of your more sensitive pages. Data leakage. So a lot of retail stores have a lot of loyalty programs. They certainly don't want to be sharing that information with anyone that asks. Within digital though, the theft or leakage of data is quite common. So we need to be careful and monitor and make sure we know who's on our site. Data privacy. So similar to data leakage, you don't want just anyone having access to your customers' data. You also want your customers feeling that their data is safe and secure. And the last one we have here is regulatory compliance. So our clients say it's obviously important to keep the consumer's data protected from a moral standpoint, but there's also laws and regulations around these types of things and how they should be handled. So with GDPR, CCPA, VCDPA, and other states following suit, it's very important to get in front of this and be able to proactively say what steps are being taken to ensure your consumers are protected. So the actual digital risks of retail. We did an analysis of 20 retail sites throughout 2020. And what we found was that 91% of domains are not actually owned by the retail site. And 2% of the domains that we found are considered high risk. So looking at the group of sites on average, there are 124 domains. So with the greater number of domains, there's a greater amount of risk because of a variety of things those domains can bring. More network calls, greater latency, higher file download size, etc. If we focus on one example in this first chart here, you can see a particular site making progress over time with the navy blue line. So increased visibility to the site allows for the marketing and security teams to have more control over those sites and be more aligned together when working to have governance over their third-party vendors. So within the second chart here, we want to focus on domain drift. So large amounts of variation within the site can signal a lack of control. Again, looking at the navy blue line, you see there's a significant amount of variability, which speaks to a pretty high level of risk at the top level. Now, this could signal, a new program being rolled out, a change in vendors. So it's very well that this could be expected, but the important piece is to have visibility into this and understand why it's happening. The final chart we want to look at is cookies. So total counts of cookies provide some insights into the level of control. When speaking with some of our clients, really sophisticated security groups want to know and lock down what every cookie is and the purpose of it. So again, taking a look at the navy blue line, it remains relatively stagnant, and then we have a pretty steep drop in cookies. So it's important to have visibility into this type of thing, understand why it's happening. And this particular example could speak to the site owners restricting the types of trackers they allow on their site. Okay, so getting back to Bob. Bob visits a retail website and wants to purchase some clothing, so he looks through the product pages. While doing that, 405 calls are made by 58 domains, and only 2 are owned by the retailer. 58 cookies are dropped, and only 15 of those are from the retailer. So if we take a look at best in class, we say to strive for less than 50 domains. This particular example is slightly over there. However, with cookies, we say that 95% should be first party, and here we're around 26%. Okay, so step 2, Bob selects the items he wants to purchase and places those into his cart. You'll notice a decrease in cookies and a decrease in domains, down to 44 domains, 45 cookies, and 42% of those cookies are from the first party. So that particular retailer worked with us to minimize the risk on a number of their journey pages, as you'll notice a theme throughout this journey here. So the actual payment, Bob inputs his payment information. You see a significant decrease in cookies, a significant decrease in domains. 100% of cookies are now first party, which is a fantastic increase. This page is highly sensitive, should definitely be the most secure throughout the journey, and this example has done a fantastic job of that. Okay, order confirmation. So Bob receives his confirmation that his order is placed. We would expect a bump here given the marketing need to track this information. So you see a jump up to 62 domains and also a bump up to 60 cookies from 14 on the previous slide. So if we look at analyzing the journey, this type of digital journey speaks to the many potential risks that consumers face in digital that they wouldn't necessarily face in brick and mortar. We want to emphasize again here the payment page. This is the most sensitive page by far that exposes PII and PCI type data. This example that we walked through today has diligently worked through securing these pages. Here we're right where we want to be on calls and third parties. And working with our clients, we hear that there shouldn't be, anyone outside of the first party and a payment servicer on this page. So this example has done a good job of that. In your own examples, there's a couple of questions that you should ask yourself. Who are these vendors who have access to customer data? How did they get to your site? What value do these vendors bring to the customer experience? And what is their impact on security, privacy, and performance? So while this page did a good job of keeping their domains and cookies to a minimum on their sensitive pages, in this example, we do have vendors like ClickTail and Facebook on the payment page, which may be needed, but also may not. Again, it's important to understand who's on those pages and why. Okay, so our recommendation. Our clients ask us a lot, what should we tackle first? We typically tell our clients to pay attention to the payment page first. This is the information that bad actors want. So what are some steps you can take to lock that page down? We recommend you take 30 days, assemble your Tiger team of people you need, usually cross department, and document your needs. Over the next 3 months, audit that environment. Have an example of a policy a physical contract that should reside with the digital risk teams, and communicate out your expectations internally and externally. There's a lot of regulations around this currently with CCPA, state of Virginia rolling out similar opt-out rules, and you need to know when someone's violating. So after the audit, you would enforce your policies. Several of our clients leverage our partnerships with third parties to remediate and resolve any errors. You give them the opportunity to correct their errors. But if worse comes to worst, you can take necessary actions like applying legal weight or development actions to remove these vendors from your site, to lock your pages down and enforce third-party risk reduction.
And this concludes our overview of the state of digital risks in retail environments. To learn more, I do encourage you to check out our industry insights. Just simply visit our homepage at mediatrust.com and click on the Industry Insights button in the upper navigation. You'll see a collection of industry-specific benchmarks that are updated on a monthly basis. If you have any additional questions, go ahead and reach out to us at info@themediatrust.com. Thank you.